So before we dig into the conversation, I wanted to kind of give a little bit of an intro about who you are as a human being, and anything that I'm missing, please, by all means, just fill it in. So we've known each other now for a couple years, but I first came across your work when I was in the World Domination Summit community and event.
Old school.
And yeah, back in the day. And
Uh-huh.
Jonathan, you're an accomplished entrepreneur who has, for probably the greater part of the last decade,
About 10 years,
um,
yeah.
yeah, helped people, served people through different means of business that has allowed them to explore what they're passionate about in their careers, but also most recently in the past couple years, it's been more of a focus around giving people more options in their life through a bigger focus on improving their relationship with their body. Is that
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah.
And your work has been featured in Fast Company, Forbes, across nerdfitness.com, Gold Medal Bodies, Art of Manliness. You've been on dozens of podcasts. Where else have people maybe come across your work or your presence online?
Oh, geez. I think you hit the major ones.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
also attended your workshop at the Camp Nerd Fitness in 2016. So it was a movement oriented workshop. So both online and in person, which is, I think, like becoming more and more unique these days with all the different personalities that are just focused in helping serve people online.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to mix it up. These days we have so much stuff online. And it's just like people are craving more of that real in person, interaction. And that's, one of the things I like that you're doing about this show is just, it's not just, there's so many podcasts that are great, but it's just on Skype and whatever. But I love that you're doing it like in person and doing the video and the audio and, mixing it up. It's cool.
Thank you. Yeah, and then adding in the live stream, which is still this thing that's constantly evolving and sometimes works better than others, kind of adds like another interesting pressure to it, but is the closest thing that I would imagine to how a conversation would happen in real life. That it would be live, it would happen, and then
Yeah.
that's the way it would be existing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Live. I think live is cool. And I think, it's cool that you called it pressure, but I think that we're all trying to figure out like how we're doing this whole thing. It's all a big experiment. I know for myself, it's kind of a constant process of evolution and just like, oh, I kind of think I know what I'm doing right now. And then, wow, I know absolutely nothing, and it's just kind of these cycles. And yeah, it definitely, keeps it interesting
Hmm.
for sure.
That's interesting because even what you just said right there reminds me. I think I talked about this concept with somebody else before, but there's this uh, ideology, or maybe it is more of just like a concept in, I think it was psychology, but it's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. And it's the idea that oftentimes people go through this cycle when they enter in a new field of study or maybe a new practice where they start and they know nothing and they know they don't know a lot, and then maybe they become somewhat proficient, and then they think that they have maybe reached some sort of mountaintop, and then
Hmm.
oftentimes they'll realize, oh shit, I actually know even less than I thought I knew at the beginning.
Right.
But then it kind of goes back up where they think that they know more, and then they come back down through the
Right.
the valley and they realize, oh my goodness, like there's so much more to it still.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jonathan, where I'd love to have this conversation go is to kind of maybe start a little bit closer to before you were doing what you do now online with Embodied Strength and with Uncaged Human, which are two really, really valuable ways that you and then also a partner that you're working with now are serving people in this capacity that we were talking about, where you're helping people you're helping give people more options in life through improving their relationships with their body. Um, Before we kind of go into that kind of linear progression, I don't want to put you into a box, but I'm going to put you into a box because people understand, I guess, like the terminology
We
a
all
little bit
need
easier.
boxes, you know. It's
Why
helpful.
why did you decide to bring your career focus towards fitness and well-being? Yeah.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because back when I started it, when you were talking about, going through that process, what'd you call it?
It's the Dunning-Kruger effect.
Dunning-Kruger
Yeah.
effect.
I'll put
Okay,
that in the show
cool.
notes for people to
Yeah,
check
yeah,
out.
yeah. I'd never heard it described like that, but I like that. It felt really real for me. That's kind of the process that I went through with my journey and evolution with my business. And you know, when I first started, I had a kind of a general like personal development blog that was just my name, and then eventually I branded it, um, and I was helping people, as you've kind of alluded to earlier, figure out like what is their passion, what is that offer that they have to give to the world. And that was really fun and interesting for a long time. And what I realized is that wasn't the thing that I was most passionate about. Ironically, it was something that I was good at, and it was a good opportunity. It was a good, niche, if you will. Although now there's like so many people doing that, right? Trying to help you like find your passion or quit your job or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Like when I started that, there was like a lot less people doing it. So it's changed a lot. But at the time, it was something that I kind of fell into, because I'd built this blog originally. This was back when, like, if you told people you had a blog, they were like, oh, wow, I should check that out. That's cool.
Because
Yeah.
there were enough blogs for people
Right.
to actually remember which ones they would
Right.
go to.
You have a newsletter?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. I should read that
What
because I read emails.
if
what I
if you
mean?
had to guess, like what year was that? Like 2010, 2011, around then?
No, that was like 2008.
2008. So the early
Yeah.
days of blogging, weblogging,
Mm-hmm.
pre any major social media platform other than maybe MySpace. Was even MySpace around then?
MySpace was around. I mean, you had Twitter, but Twitter was new still. Like that's when people used Twitter. I mean, I know people use Twitter now, but like they used it to have conversations back then. Now it feels to me more like a distribution channel, type of thing. But yeah, it was different back then. And I started this thing around personal development, mostly because I didn't want to work for someone else. I was like, I'm tired of working in office jobs, like, having to follow someone else's schedule and, do what someone else wanted me to do just to get paid to pay the bills to survive, like I wanted to get out of that. I wanted to escape from that. And blogging seemed like a good way to do that. And like I said, there wasn't a lot of people doing it at the time. And through that process, I was able, a year or so, a little over a year later, I was able to quit my job because I was obsessed with it. Like I would spend every single waking minute that I could just like building this blog and, trying to build an email list. And I experimented with all these different modalities to try to monetize. Like,
So giving people resources
Yeah.
to discover how they could like create their own work, become their own entrepreneur
Well,
of some sort.
that came later. At first I was just doing like affiliate stuff, and I had an ebook and stuff like that. And then after that, like I started doing coaching. So I started offering coaching to people. That was intended to be more like personal development, kind of like live a better life, like, stuff like that. But most people wanted help with figuring out what their passion is, like how they could escape the 9 to 5. Because I had been writing publicly about my experience and my process on my blog as I was working up to this goal. So these readers were following along the journey.
So you were
with
sharing
me.
your journey.
Yeah. So when people came to me for help, they were like, I want to do that too. So I was like, I don't really feel like a big authority on that because I had just done it, I wasn't like, this was my job or, like something I really had a lot of experience with, but I was like, okay, sure, I'll share with you what I know. And over time, that just became the most popular thing, the most popular thing people wanted help with. And I was of the mind that, it's about them. It's not about me necessarily. It is to a degree. I think if you go down that path too much, like it's all about the people that you help and what they want. You can, I think it depends on your personality too. Like some people are able to just be like, this is just a job. It's just about helping people and, helping them reach their goals. But for me, I made that decision, right? Like it's more about what my readers want, what they want help with. And it just seemed like a smarter choice to make. But over time, I started to feel like it felt like something that I just kind of fell into rather than something I really actively chose to do, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, over time I started to realize like, oh, I want to figure out how to transition into what I'm really passionate about, which is movement, helping people with their bodies, helping people live a better life by being more embodied. But it was a process, and it was challenging because, it can be hard to walk away from something that's working.
Yeah. That's so interesting because you stumbled upon something that could continue to sustain you, continue to give people real value, and it kind of brought you back to the starting point of why you started the online project, which was to get away from something that you were not as driven to put like your heart and soul into. And
right. But different, because at least with that, I could control my own schedule and my projects and things like that. And I did have more autonomy,
more
and
control
and freedom and stuff like that.
More options.
Yeah, for sure. But there was a part of me that was just like, this isn't the thing that it gets me excited anymore. And I think the irony of it was that over time, I started to get frustrated with people that wanted help, like to quit their job and start something, start their own business that they're, is based on their passion, and then just kind of like not really following through,
So you wanted to be walking the walk too, that you were helping people get towards, right?
Yeah, definitely. And it was, it was frustrating seeing that happen with people, which I get, because it's challenging. Like it's challenging if you have a full-time job and you're trying to build something else. It's challenging if you have a family or you're going to school full-time or whatever it is. It's not easy. But the irony, back to that point, is that as I was transitioning out of this business, I started to have more empathy for what they were going through, because I was back in that position of like starting over, building something from scratch and being like, I have no idea what I'm doing.
And so for people who are following along, so you've built Pay to Exist.
Yeah.
You have strong readership. What was your email list size at that time?
It was like around 20,000 people.
It's pretty sizable email list, like something, I think anybody who's developing an online business like is striving to get towards. And you had a coaching program as well as one-on-one coaching that you were offering?
I did do one-on-one coaching with a small group of people, and then I had a more scalable or bigger kind of group program. Yeah.
And so I don't know if you'd be able to kind of trace back, like, was there any sort of moment or series of events that led you to make that connection that you needed to pivot away from Pay to Exist and from this personal development program that you had created? And
well, it was more so just my ongoing internal process of reflection, and how excited I was about it. and just noticing that pattern of, lack of feeling really excited. I think the other part too is that I, and I think to some degree this is my fault, but I got tired of talking about the same things over and over too. I think there maybe were ways I could have changed it up and, brought in different perspectives and things like that. But I think that's one of the challenges that you have to figure out when you're in any kind of business or any kind of work where it is kind of about you teaching stuff, and 7 years later, you're still teaching the same stuff, and it starts to feel like just you're going through the motions, over and over, and there's not that spark anymore. That's what happened to me. I think there are things that I could have done differently for sure, but that was something that I came up against. It's just like talking about the same things. I'm writing the same blog posts. I'm writing the same, content emails, and it just kind of felt like, it's not there anymore.
And so, pay to exist, you decide to part ways from it, or divert a lot of the focus and attention. And what was next?
Yeah, well, funny that you mentioned that, and was there a series of moments or something like that? Because the thing that pushed me actually over the edge was the whole election process in 2016.
So with Donald Trump becoming president,
and Hillary and all this stuff, and it was just like I had been putting it off and avoiding. Like, I knew it was something I wanted to do and transition out of it, but I didn't have that I have to do this, because like I said, it was working, and I think there's a danger in getting comfortable with anything that's working, right? Like, it's hard to walk away from that. But after that whole fiasco, right, because it was just a giant circus, I thought to myself, like, I don't know what the future is going to be like. I don't know how much time I'm going to have to do this. Who the hell knows what's going to happen? And I didn't want to spend any more time not doing the thing that I really felt like I was meant to do.
Which was what?
Which is helping people really uncage their bodies and live more embodied, live more, I think actually I really liked how you said it in the beginning, or you said more options.
More options. Yeah. We were chatting about that. Yeah.
More options in your body, because that's a thing, our lives don't require us to move very much anymore.
How, I'm sorry. So how do people get more options? Through getting stronger, more flexible? Like what are those things? Yeah. What are those processes?
Yeah. I mean, if you want to break it down into 3 really simple categories, you could look at strength, mobility, building more control, or skill, right? Moving with more skill. So by expanding those attributes, right, you start to expand what your body's capable of. And for me, the reason I do that, and the reason I'm passionate about that, is because I think that the stronger and more capable and confident you feel in your body, the more it just affects every area of your life, right? It affects your relationships. It affects the choices that you make, how you feel about yourself. But it also affects the experiences you have in life. Like, the less capable you are, the less things you're going to do. The less adventures you're going to go on. You might say no to things more. You might not play with your kids or your grandkids, or the list goes on, right? It affects everything. We live in this body, and I think we can life's not going to do it for us. It doesn't do it for us anymore. We have to take back that control and decide for ourselves, how do we want to live
Yeah.
in this vessel that we have?
Yeah, it's just it's only becoming in my personal experience, like life is only becoming more and more comfortable, and it's only easier for life to be comfortable, which is like this weird thing because that would be something that if you gave somebody like a just a basic question like do you want something to be easy or do you want something to be hard, like 99 out of 100 people will say, oh, I want it to be easy, but then you don't realize what you are giving up when you don't try that thing that maybe is hard.
Right.
Or maybe you don't even have the ability anymore to try that thing that's hard because you've been taking the easy road the whole way.
Yes to the easy for so long. It's funny because it's this inverse relationship, right? You said doing hard and easy things. I think that's a good way to think about it. I've often thought about it as like, things that are comfortable versus uncomfortable. And the irony is that life is getting more and more comfortable. It's getting more easy. But the more we choose those things that are supposed to make us more comfortable, we actually increase our sensitivity to discomfort. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if we don't move, and we choose the couch or the cushion or the
treadmill indoors versus the hike or run outdoors.
Yeah. Yeah. The more we choose those things, the more we actually become uncomfortable more easily.
Become more uncomfortable being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know, like something that for me, a very tangible, like change in my life that happened this past year with my girlfriend and I, she grew up surfing in Rhode Island and then she lived in Hawaii for the greater part of 5 years. So that's where she was surfing. She was surfing in Hawaii, which that's the spot that everybody, if they ever wanted to go surfing, they're going to go surf in Hawaii. Why? Because you can wear board shorts every single day of the year. You can be in the water without a wetsuit. All you do is you get your board, your bathing suit, you're in the water, you're set.
Right.
Now I live in Oregon. She lives in Oregon. We live together. And
it's a little different.
A little bit different. The water at the Oregon coast, because we have the ocean just about 2 hours away from Portland here, is much colder than Hawaii. The temperature of the water right now is, I think, 49 degrees Fahrenheit. Hawaii, the temperatures in the water there hover between the 70s and even sometimes I think like 80 degrees. I can't say that for a fact, but I know when I went a couple months ago.
How much does do you know how much the temperature changes here? Does it say pretty much the same?
It stays in the 50s, right? During the summer, and the last time I was surfing was November 12th. The water was 51 degrees.
Okay.
Yeah. And we were in the water for 3 or 4 hours. So we were together. We still are together. We've been together for almost 3 years now. We've been talking about surfing, but we've been really avoiding going to surf at the Oregon coast because, you think about that water, you get goosebumps just thinking about it. Right. People don't really go into that water without a wetsuit.
Kind of already just thinking about it.
But this year, for whatever reason, we decided, let's try it. We have 2 good friends who go surfing year round, and they invited us to go. And so we decided to rent wetsuits and try it out. And we fell in love with it. We started going surfing pretty much every weekend this summer. And it was something that brought the 2 of us together. We love to surf. I'm terrible, but I really enjoy being in the water. And with a wetsuit, it's a lot more comfortable. But sharing that experience of going through the process of becoming comfortable being in the colder water and knowing that the joy that we would get through sharing the waves, sharing the experiences of going to the coast, and also having an activity that we shared with other friends was gonna really make our relationship stronger, which I can say without a doubt it did. But it again comes back to this to this topic that you talked about a little bit earlier, where the more that you decide to do the easy things versus the hard things, which for us, the easy thing was to say, no, we won't go to the coast this weekend. We'll just go to the park around the corner. It became harder and harder to actually think that we would go surfing, that we would go and do that.
It just the challenge of it grows
it
mentally.
Grew bigger. Yeah, it got bigger and bigger. But then we started surfing in July. We kept surfing in August. We went surfing in September.
That's so cool.
We were surfing in November, which there's already mountains that have snow at that time. So it's definitely, because you talked about it with me earlier, that like the reason you do what you do is to give people more options. And I feel really lucky that we had the option to not only go to the coast, but to be able to be in that water for a couple hours and like enjoy it.
Yeah. You know, what's funny is when I first moved to Oregon, because we've been here about almost, I think, 8 years now. But I thought that, the water, it's cold, but it'll get warm in the summer. It does not. It's the Oregon coast is just like cold.
The warmest the water gets in the ocean, I think, is in October, actually.
October.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And there are little kids that go in the water with no wetsuits, with nothing on but a Speedo, sometimes even naked, and you don't see adults doing that, which I think is hilarious. But
no one tells, or the kids don't know that it's supposed to be hard.
Yeah.
Right. They're just like, I'm having fun. I'm doing my thing. Right. Yeah.
So I didn't mean not to take over that, but it's just that story really like stuck in my mind.
Man.
So 2016, the elections come around. It's really like kind of a wacky time. And it was the impetus for you to really move forward with what became Uncaged Human, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So kind of talk me through that process. Like, what was the offering that you started with? How were you interacting with students?
Yeah. So for me, it really started with one-on-one coaching. I think one of the cool things that I learned from my business experience with Paid to Exist and what I did before and just helping other people was realizing, like, if I have something because everyone wants, at least most people, right? They want to do the passive income thing, or they want to like scale or whatever it is. And I like that too. Although I have different feelings about what passive income means now, because I know like how much of that is mostly just marketing and people trying to sell you this dream, because people want things to be easy, right? Back to that whole thing. Just push a button. But I learned that if I had something that people would pay for one-on-one coaching with, right, which is a significantly stronger or higher investment, then I could have a model for something that maybe I could create a product or group offering or something like that. So that's why I started with one-on-one coaching. And just because I like working with people in an individual level and getting to know what is it that, that makes them not show up. What is it that gets in their way? What are the things that get them excited, right? About movement, about training, about, showing up to a consistent practice.
And so when you say one-on-one coaching, I'm sorry, this is as opposed to people who want to get healthier, want to get more fit in a group class, small group classes, big group classes.
Yeah.
Maybe actually, could you? Because I want to get back to this, to what you're talking about right now. But I want to make sure that people get a little bit of an idea about your background, because you've been training for most of your life, whether it's martial arts, whether it's gymnastics, strength training, whether it's hand balancing, whether it's flexibility, whether it's weightlifting. Yeah, we've known each other for a couple years, and we share a lot of time together at the climbing gym or at the park, all sorts of things. But yeah, maybe could you talk a little bit about your background in fitness and wellness and stuff like that?
Yeah. So, I grew up loving sports, playing all kinds of different sports, being obsessed with that whole world. I think I got excited about that from watching strongman or World's Strongest Men competitions, and then like pro wrestling when I was a little kid, and then like asking my dad if I could like borrow his free weights, and I was like curling like these 5-pound dumbbells, thinking like, yeah, I'm gonna get ripped. And that's, you know, it's always been something I've been passionate about, but for a long time I like got away from that, you know, just got sucked into the whole, like most people do, honestly. And that's why I have a lot of compassion for the clients that we work with. I got sucked into the whole, like, you got to get a job and focus on your career and, you know, make money. And I worked in a bunch of office jobs and kind of lost my passion for movement for a number of years, you know, 6 or 7 years or so. But martial arts was something I always really wanted to do. And I wanted to do Wing Chun, and I think it's because this girl I was dating, she was really into it. She had done it for a long time. Mm-hmm. So
which is also the martial art of what Bruce Lee kind of pioneered,
what he started
right?
with.
Yeah,
what he started with. So I was looking for a Wing Chun teacher. This is when I lived down in LA, and I couldn't find one close to me, but I found someone that taught Jeet Kune Do, which is the martial art Bruce Lee developed or kind of really synthesized from a lot of different styles that he studied.
Was Dan Inosanto a practitioner and teacher of Jeet Kune Do too?
Yeah.
He was one of Bruce Lee's students, or
Yeah.
he was the teacher of Bruce Lee?
He is a teacher of Jeet Kune Do, although he does a lot of like FMA, like Filipino martial arts stuff.
Okay.
But yes, he is one of Bruce Lee's, he was one of Bruce Lee's main students. So I found this Jeet Kune Do teacher, and I was like, oh, sure, I'll try this out. It's not Wing Chun, but I'll try it out. And I just got obsessed with it, man. Like, I started training like 2 or 3 times a week, and then eventually that led to me doing an apprentice program with him. He started inviting me to, because he was a Chinese medicine doctor as well, so he was like obsessed with natural movement and like barefoot hiking and running and stuff like that. So he started inviting me out, and we would go like barefoot running in the mountains and in the San Gabriel Mountains in Southern California, go like pick wild walnuts from these trees and bring gymnastic rings on our hikes, and then like hang them from trees and do like, you know, ring routines.
That sounds amazing.
It was super cool, man. Like, and of course, you know, at the time I had no idea about like mobility or progressive overload or any, so I accumulated my fair share of injuries from just like being super stoked about all the things, and of course, you know, martial arts contact sport, so that will happen as well, just from sparring. But it was a blast nonetheless, you know, despite all that stuff. It was such a blast, and it reignited my passion for training. And I really appreciate that teacher, because he exposed me to a lot of these things that I didn't even know about. Like, I didn't even know about gymnastic rings and gymnastic strength training. Mm-hmm. So that led me down the path of like gymnastic bodies, found out about like GMB stuff, found out about, you know, all these different modalities, Ito Portal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Ryan Hurst is gold medal bodies. Christopher Summers is gymnastic bodies. So early online fitness kind of resources. I remember the Gymnastic Bodies Forum. That's how I came across the work of Ito Portal as well. Yeah,
old school, man.
Yeah, I have the printed book from Coach Summers that they stopped selling. So really, really interesting.
Those are the days, man.
Yeah, and then also it's interesting, the people that kind of were present and were like prominent voices in those forums. A lot of them have even like still continued to share knowledge online, but a lot of them were in that same space. Like Yuri Marmostein,
was one of the forum moderators. Ito was a forum
Philip
monitor.
Chubb is actually like in there too, a decent amount.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
Mindful Mover, if anybody's following him.
Yeah, shout out to Philip. I love his Instagram. Posts so much value. Like, you guys should
really
definitely
educational work. But yeah, it's interesting that a lot of people kind of came to the forums of gymnastic bodies and Got a lot of really useful advice on training, gymnastics strength training safely and effectively, really is the big one.
Because before you would just, you just do more.
Yeah.
Like you just like be like, oh, I just need to do more reps, or whatever. Or train harder.
My first online training connection was, I don't know if you've ever heard of Matt Fury, combat conditioning.
Yep.
I came across his work on an ad when I was reading. This was in high school, so I don't read this stuff anymore. But Tucker Max's website. There was an interesting Google ad, with
bringing it back,
with a dude doing a back bend on top of his forehead with his arms crossed across his chest, and then someone sitting on his pelvis as like a feat of strength. And so that was Matt Fury.
Hey, bridge is the strongest shape in the world, right? Proof.
Yeah.
Proof right there.
So I'm sorry. So gymnastic bodies, gold medal bodies.
Ito.
Yeah, Ito's work. So this was around the time that you were training really heavily in Jeet Kune Do.
Jeet Kune Do. Yeah. Well, because my teacher exposed me to all these things, and then I was like, oh, I want to be able to do a planche and a front lever and all this stuff. I thought gymnastics strength was the superior strength, hands down. I abandoned like any kind of weight training. I got super religious about it. It was just bowing down to the holy gospel, of gymnastics strength.
Yeah, for anybody who doesn't know, like a planche is when you're balancing on your hands, your body is horizontal, your feet are either together, which is the hardest version, or your feet are spread. So you're holding a push-up with your feet off the ground.
Yeah.
Front lever, you're hanging from a bar, from rings, and your body is horizontal. You've got people who are doing one-arm handstands, all sorts of flips. Anything that you've seen a breakdancer do, a gymnast can do, typically. Not always, but
yeah.
So all these feats of strength was your I don't know, your motivation.
Yeah. I wanted to do it all. And of course, I didn't, well, I won't say of course, but I didn't get the planche or the front lever. But the thing that mattered is that the pursuit of those things taught me a lot. Taught me a lot about the body. I had no idea what scapular positioning meant, or even that I had a scapula before gymnastics bodies and gymnastic strength training. So it taught me a lot of how my body worked and what my body was capable of, and
progressions. I bet were a big thing, right?
Progressions.
Yeah.
I didn't even know about progressions. I thought you just do stuff more.
Yeah.
You just try harder. Yeah.
Yeah. For somebody who doesn't know, like what is the concept of progression when we think about it in training and in fitness?
Yeah. Progression. So any movement that you want to master, right? It could be a strength movement or a mobility movement or both, right? So like a good example is, say for instance, single leg squat or pistol squat, right? If you don't have progressions, you might just think like, I just try to do that over and over, and you probably won't get anywhere. In fact, maybe you'll hurt yourself, or you'll just get really frustrated and give up, which is what happens for most people. So a progression is, okay, let's take a look at your strength and your mobility and see where you're at. And then let's match the proper scaled version of that to your body that's going to help you get stronger and more mobile. And progressions to that could involve like a less intense version of that. So just single leg squatting into a chair, right?
So reducing the range of motion.
Or it could be using some kind of assistance, right? If you lack the mobility, you could hold on to something in front of you, There's a lot of different ways to tackle that.
Can you do a squat with 2 feet maybe first, right? Can
you do a squat with
2 legs? Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Although I will say that there is a myth that like you should master double squat, double leg squat before you do a single leg squat. I personally think, double leg squat is a great goal for sure, but the cool thing about single leg training and unilateral, any kind of unilateral training, which is just one-sided training of the body, it's a lot harder to cheat, and it's a lot harder to, you know, compensate, so to speak. So if you're working on one leg, it's going to expose your imbalances.
So very similar to, correct me if I'm wrong, but maybe if you were comparing somebody who wants to bench press 100 pounds, maybe they can bench press, say, 50 pounds with a bar, but maybe they can't actually take that same amount of weight. So 50 pounds divided by 2 is 25 pounds, but two 25-pound dumbbells will be harder to bench press than a 50-pound bar.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, because they can't, like, finagle something in their body, well, this side does this, and then this side does this, and then they're bypassing, these weak links, right?
Yeah, so the unilateral
in their
work will
body.
oftentimes expose those weak links a little bit more accurately, right?
Yeah. And then you're working with them, directly. Yeah. Yeah. That said, I think everyone should master
Progressions.
the body weight squat for sure too.
Yeah, I think progressions is a really important concept for anyone who's wanting to take a journey towards any sort of a advanced body weight movement, or even barbell movements. I think it's simple for someone to understand that until they can bench press or squat 300 pounds, they shouldn't try to bench press or squat 400 pounds. It's like, oh, okay.
Right.
Yeah. Got to learn to walk before you can learn to run.
Right. And a progression, a first progression, and this is something that I'm really passionate about teaching people, because it's a big limiting factor for most folks, is that before you even start to get into those progressions, starting to learn how to activate the movement properly. So learning how do I connect with the various muscles that are responsible for creating that movement first, and then bring in the progression. So like bench press, right? Like where do my lats need to do in the bench press, right? What does my chest need to do? How do I need to stabilize myself first, and then working in the movement? Because sometimes you just go into the movement and then you have technical failure, right? You can't maintain the form not because necessarily always you're not strong enough, because you don't have the activation, the ability to know how to activate the necessary muscles, right?
Yeah. With bringing us back to where you were, the Jeet Kune Do teacher, he really gave you, I think, like a new perspective. You were saying with gymnastics, like that was like a big motivator. Where did your training go from there? You were continuing to practice Jeet Kune Do, and then did you move on to a different type of training, or did you find a new teacher?
Yeah, so I moved to Oregon, and I looked for a Jeet Kune Do teacher up here, didn't really find one. Interestingly, there's a lot of people that say they teach Jeet Kune Do, but because Bruce Lee said, take what is useful, make it your own, discard what is, what's not useful. A lot of people interpret that as Jeet Kune Do is just whatever you want it to be. Does that make sense?
Yeah. It's very free form.
Right. It's free form. It's free flowing. Jeet Kune Do doesn't have boundaries or boxes or whatever. So people will be like, oh, I teach Jeet Kune Do, but actually what they teach is boxing, or what they teach is FMA. That's pretty common Filipino martial arts. So I couldn't find a Jeet Kune Do teacher up here. So I continued doing a lot of body weight exercise stuff, just trying to figure out, like, something that got me obsessed for a while was I was having these plateaus in my training, right? Or I was running up against some kind of injury, and I kept wondering, like, what am I missing here? Like, what's going on? Why does this keep happening? And I'm the kind of inquisitive person, for better or worse. You know, it's kind of gotten me in trouble sometimes, just thinking too much about things. But I realized at some point, like, there's this mismatch, right? And I think this is more common in our cultural consciousness in the movement world now than it was back then. But I started to realize, oh, there's this mismatch of our lifestyle, right? We're not living the movement lifestyle that we evolved to live, right? So there's a incompatibility in the way most of us live with the way we lived for millions and millions and millions of years. We're not required to move anymore. We've outsourced movement to machines, or other people do the movement for us.
You drive to work instead of walking to the farm.
Right. You don't have to, pick berries. You don't have to hunt. You don't have to go get your water. You don't have to set up your camp. All these movements that we would be doing all day long. Mm-hmm. We're not required to do them anymore. And it's my belief that that's one of the big reasons why so many people have these challenges with their body, whether it's, postural issues, or, nagging injuries, or, aches and pains, or whatever it is. I think that's at least a big part of it. So
the mismatch.
That mismatch. So I started going down this path of like, okay, what would be the ideal movement diet, so to speak, of a human? What would that look like? And what are those movements that are missing from modern life? And that started to become my obsession after that. Like, I started realizing, oh, there's all these different worlds, right? Like developmental movement patterns, hanging, squatting, walking, crawling, climbing,
being outside more, maybe.
Being outside more.
Yeah.
Right. Moving with other people is a movement nutrient, right? Which I believe that term came from Frank Francis.
I have his book.
Yeah. Exuberant Animal.
Exuberant Animal, which is so funny because my friend Kevin Carroll.
Great book.
Yeah, fantastic book. He's good friends with Frank Fornage, and he's actually listed in his credits. Mm-hmm. Kevin is, and Kevin used to be. He was the, I think, third black head physical trainer in the NBA for the Philadelphia 76ers. Good buds with Kobe Bryant.
Oh, really?
Worked for Nike for a while, but has a really interesting background in the military. He speaks several languages, lives here in Portland, Oregon. Very, very interesting.
You gotta get him on the show, man.
Yeah, I would love to. Kevin's always on the move. He's always on the go.
Shout out to Kevin.
Yeah, shout out to KC if you're watching.
Get on the show.
The Catalyst. But yes, Frank Fornich, that book is excellent. And the movement nutrients, I love that concept. That concept. Yeah, we are deficient.
Right. Yeah, it's a helpful concept. I think Katie Bowman has done a lot to popularize this metaphor of movement diet, movement nutrients.
She advocates people getting rid of their furniture, actually, right? Isn't that one of Katie's things?
Floor culture,
yeah. I apologize that we're in these comfortable chairs on this show, but I know what you mean.
I like my chair dessert. It's nice.
Yeah. Helps with the posture support a little bit. So you understood that there was a missing component in most people's lifestyles, and you understood that there was a way that you could motivate people to resolve that, to fix that. Is that accurate to say?
Motivation, I think, is a piece of it. I think another piece of it is just having that map, right? Having that structure of like, what are those missing nutrients? What is that, a healthy, balanced movement diet look like? How can I integrate that into my lifestyle in the modern world without being like, okay, I'm going to pack up everything and go live on, you know, in a van down by the river, or, you know, in the woods, or whatever it is. Integration is important, and making it accessible. Right.
So when someone comes to you and they want to know, like, Jonathan, like, I know I need to change something in my life, like, what does the process look like with that person? Or is there a common antidote that you recommend for people?
Yeah.
Whether it's walking to the coffee shop, or whether it's sitting on the floor instead of sitting in a chair.
Walking and sitting on the floor are great places to start.
This is even before we start to talk
baselines.
about nutrition and diet and all things aside, right? This is more oriented around like movement.
Yeah. How are you moving, right? How you move is ultimately like how you live, and you know, is going to determine the experience you have in your body. So I mean, one of the places that I start is just, it depends on the person, right? Like, is this person, you know, are they looking for support and coaching and stuff like that? Or are they just looking for general advice? I might send them to some blog posts or things like that. But most of the time it starts with just assessing, like, okay, what are you doing right now? Where's your mobility at right now? Mobility to me is the big foundation.
How do you define mobility? Because I think that's a commonly used term that a lot of people have a vague understanding of.
Yeah, and of course you have like functional mobility. No one ever talks about dysfunctional mobility.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Wanna
So yeah, what do you say to somebody like, Jonathan, like, I don't even know like what mobility is. Like, does that mean I touch my toes, or?
Yeah. It means you can do a one-arm handstand on top of someone doing a bridge.
Excellent. Very hypermobile scapula and
For sure.
strong back, lumbar spine.
Yeah. No, mobility is the ability to control an active range of motion, right? So to maintain control, whereas it's, you know, a little bit different than flexibility, whereas flexibility could be like, you know, passively getting into a position using some kind of external aid. So like think about the difference between holding your leg up over your head, like side kicking someone in the face, versus like you're just doing the splits on the floor and gravity is like assisting you.
So if you're able to hold your leg by someone's shoulder, someone's head,
you have to actively maintain
so
tension
that's
in your body.
That's a expression of like high mobility.
Yeah, that would be like I think that's a good picture.
Versus someone in a seated forward fold in a yoga class after 10 minutes, like touching their forehead to their knees, might just be a representation that they have some flexibility there in their hamstrings and back or something. Yeah, but not necessarily as mobile as the martial artist with the high kick.
Potentially, yeah. So when I look at mobility in a person, of course it depends on like what are their goals, what is it that they want. But if we're just talking about general overall, you know, what do you need to live, you know, healthy, pain-free life, right? There's certain things that we want to see, right? Like, can you lift your shoulder completely overhead without raising your rib cage, right? Or without flaring your lower back? That's fairly useful to have that range of motion in your shoulder if you ever want to, you know, maybe push something overhead or reach something.
Lift your baby up over your head, or go to the grocery store and grab a box of cereal.
Whatever it is you want to do, you know. Squat. Can you hold the bottom position of a squat, right? This is before we had chairs and stuff like that. This is a natural human resting position.
What is the bottom position of the squat that you're referencing look like? Because I think everybody has a different perspective there too.
Yeah. I mean, everyone's going to have a little bit different mobility, right? Sure. Everyone's body's shapes are different. People have different size femurs, you know, different size torsos. So I don't subscribe to this idea that there's like a perfect squat. But there's things that we can look for, like getting your heels down, you know, that's what I would consider like baseline.
So keeping your heel and your entire foot on in contact with the ground.
Yeah. And then, there probably be a little bit of rounding in your lower back and the bottom of a squat. Like you're not like pressing weight overhead or, holding weight on your back. So I think that's totally fine. But there shouldn't be so much rounding to where you're collapsed and you're kind of almost falling over. Or even so much rounding that your head is down. You can't even see, around you. So those are just a couple things. And what we found too is a lot of times, back to the activation piece, and this is why I'm passionate about this concept of helping people through activation. They're rebuilding their motor maps, right? So motor maps is a sciencey term for basically like how well you have an area of your body mapped out in your brain. Okay. So think about your hands. Your hands have so much more concentration of nerve endings in your body that they represent a big chunk of your motor maps in your motor cortex. Okay. So there's a big percentage of your brain's
processing a lot more stimulus.
Yeah, because we do so much with our hands, right? We pick things up, we touch things. It's how we interact with the world. If you don't use a certain area of your body, right, from disuse or just poor use patterns or whatever it is, that area of your body can kind of go to sleep. It can develop sensory motor amnesia. Well, big problem if that happens in a really important area of your body, like the core, right? If a muscle like your TVA muscle, your transverse abdominis, which is this inner sort of corset in your body, if that starts to develop sensory motor amnesia, that's not going to go well because it's important for stabilizing your spine, right? So when this happens, the hips are going to take over and end up doing a lot more work. So you can have tight hips, tight hamstrings. A lot of areas in your body are tight. And you can't get into a position like the deep squat because things are so tight. So what do? What do most people do?
When they want to go into the deep squat and they're too tight?
Yeah.
They'll just pretend they're more like in a chair or decide to actually sit in the chair versus sit on the ground.
Or if they're motivated and they're trying to change it, they'll stretch. They'll stretch more. Like, I need to stretch my hips or I need to stretch my ankles, right? Well, if the problem isn't actually that you don't have the mobility, but you're not activating this core stabilizer, all the stretching in the world isn't going to really help, because it's not that your hips are tight because they need to be stretched. It's because a really core muscle in your body's not doing its proper job. So once we get that activating and online properly, it's kind of like, the person showing up to work and actually doing its job so everyone else doesn't have to take over and do more work than they're supposed to. When we can get that happening, then all those other muscles can start to relax. And we've seen this happen over and over with people where they're trying to get into the squat, but once they just learn how to activate the core, then they get it. And they don't have to do the stretching over and over. So this is something we see, people, they've been working on the position for like 6 months or a year. It's like, how much progress are you making? Oh, I don't know, a little bit. Maybe that's because the approach isn't working. Maybe it's not because you're not trying hard enough. And that's what we hate to see, because people will blame themselves and think like, oh, I'm just not trying hard enough or blah, blah, blah,
Yeah, it's so interesting because what you just talked about, I've seen it. You've shared various student testimonial videos where people show where they were at one point, and then through following the programming that you, or through the programming that you've created through Uncaged Man, have created, or Uncaged Human, are then able to achieve that new range of motion. And what you just talked about with the transverse abdominis and retraining that to work as intended, I wonder, would you say it's kind of like it's a way to almost retrain, or not retrain, but to send signals to the nervous system that the body is able to go into that range in a more protected and safe way,
Yes.
because you're constantly giving it just a little bit more,
Exactly.
and you're okay. I know I've actually heard about
Exactly.
humans when they're going under anesthesia, that almost every single person who will go under anesthesia is able to do full side splits, Jean-Claude Van Damme style, under anesthesia, right? But
Right.
then when you're back to normal, you're constantly. I have some flexibility in my hamstrings and sides, like I can do my front splits, but I know that it's one of those things that I have to get back to a process of training it where it's there. I have to kind of
Right.
remind myself, like, okay,
Right.
this range is okay. Now this range is okay. Now this
Right.
range is okay. And that's like where the full split is.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's not like you said, if you're under anesthesia, you could do it. It's not that you don't have the mobility. It's that your body doesn't trust that range of motion. So that could be because of past experiences that you had with it, or it could just be that you haven't used it in a long time, right? The areas of our brain in the motor cortex that are most mapped out are the ones we use most frequently.
Yeah.
So they take up a larger percentage of space in the brain. And if you don't do the splits all the time, your body's going to be like, why the hell would I create space for that? It's inefficient. It's not useful. So yes, the more you practice that and you just dose it, right? A little bit more, a little bit more. But sometimes it's not even, I think that's true in a lot of cases, but sometimes it's actually like you can learn how to activate something and then all of a sudden it's like, bam, you got it. You just didn't know how to use the right part of your, like
Use it.
you've experienced this with climbing problems, right? You're like, oh, I didn't know I was supposed to push this way and use like this part of my body to generate that, that force. And the whole time I was trying to generate it from here. But once I just learned, that's like learning how to activate
Absolutely.
the right thing for the right position. You've showed me that too with things, like.
Oh, that's right. We were doing I don't know what it's called, but like when you're doing a stretch where your knees are bent and you're laying on your back, so it's a heavy duty quad stretch.
Yeah.
And then there's a way.
Yeah, I don't know what that's called either.
It's almost like a half zombie
Zombie press
position. Well, zombie press is different, but yeah, knowing where to utilize or recruit different groups of muscles,
right.
it's a process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's the piece about movement intelligence, where I think this is something that's getting introduced more into the conversation now that I'm really passionate about, because we know how to get stronger. We know how to get more flexible. We know how to do these things. But there's a lot of potential that can happen when you just know how to move smarter. And that's what we see in the highest level movers, like people that are really, really good at climbing.
The gymnasts that are doing very complex patterns and linking them together.
They know how to move smarter. They know how to just activate the right amount in the right position, in the right sequence, in the right time,
Not too much, not too little, just enough, to achieve some of the more complex movements.
Right.
I want to kind of make sure, because I love the tangents that we're going off on, because they make a lot of sense for me, and I think that it's really valuable for people to have baseline understandings of certain general topics that allow students of movement or fitness or training or whatever to understand how skill sets from one practice can carry over into another.
Right.
Like having those general concepts in place, I think is really important to have a solid foundation. Jonathan, where we were last on explaining your journey to where you are now, because I wanna make sure that we have that kind of full timeline for folks.
Yeah.
We were talking about you training Jeet Kune Do in California, then moving up to Oregon, looking for a new Jeet Kune Do teacher, and you were working on various gymnastic strength training movements. Were you following the programs of gymnastic bodies at that time? Or what was your training looking like when you moved to Oregon?
Well, at first it was gymnastic bodies, and then I think at that time GMB just started
gold medal bodies.
They started to get going. Funny enough, I was how I met Andy from GMB, who's kind of behind the scenes.
Is he a head trainer as well?
Not so much. He is a martial arts teacher, but he's kind of like the business guy in GMB. But I was in a mastermind with him, realized that he was doing this thing that was really cool. So I started to get into that because it was a lot of the stuff that from gymnastic bodies that I was really into, but it seemed more accessible, like the way they were teaching it. So I got excited about that, started doing a little bit more of their stuff, got involved in some beta testing of their rings programs, the floor program, stuff like that. So that started to be more of a focus for me in my training. Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, gold medal bodies. I've definitely read some of their articles and checked out some of the progressions that they have online, but it's all kind of led by Ryan Hurst. Who does he live in Japan? I think, right, or
He's
something
in
like
Japan,
that.
yeah.
And he was a gymnast at one time in his life, and then developed some really, I think, smart progressions for people just getting started with gymnastic strength training. And
made it more accessible to adults.
Yeah, somebody who wants to learn a handstand, like it's there for you if you do the work, because it doesn't matter what program you have from what teacher, if you don't do the work, the results don't happen. Yeah,
right. That's the challenge.
What are the approaches that you have maybe seen work with your students with that part, with consistency? Like, what is it that separates a student who sticks with the program for 6 to 8 to 12 weeks or however long, makes it a lifestyle, versus somebody who drops out after a week, which I think is a very relevant topic of conversation for all our New Year's resolution gym warriors.
Yeah, let's get it. No, I think that it comes. What I've noticed is come down to a couple things. One is that if you don't have like a clear sort of structure, it's challenging, right? And by structure, I mean like you have your environment dialed in, you have your habits dialed in, you have like, this is the routine that I'm doing, and these are the goals that I'm working toward.
So having a program in place,
knowing
where you're going to train,
what time, like having it be a routine, having it become like a fixture of your life,
even maybe knowing what clothes you use to train in, right?
Exactly. There's all these different aspects of ways we can hack it and sort of like put your clothes out, like have a space in your house, or like anyone that's interested in could check out the book Power of Habit. It's a great book about all these things that we're talking about.
Or something like that.
Charles Duhigg.
Charles Duhigg.
Yeah. Fantastic book. But really simple tip is just figure out something you already do every single day, and use that to sort of hijack that habit to start the new habit.
So to create a trigger, right?
Create a trigger. Yeah.
So you leave work. What do you do right after work?
Exactly. What do you do right after work? like I did this with mobility training. In the morning, I hijacked just taking my dog out in the morning. Always have to take my dog out every single morning. So right after that, I do my daily just sort of mobility warm up that helps me feeling good throughout the day. So that's a simple thing. Make it small at first, make winning easy. Everyone wants to do like 50 different things, and they're scattered, or they're just not clear about like, this is the goal that matters to me. So that's the other part. You have the structure, you have like, what is your strategy? How are you going to tackle this? The other part is being really clear on why you're doing it. And having an approach that is, one of the principles that I, talk about and frame it as like, train for who you want to be, right? So have a more identity-based approach to your training. It's fine if you want to be, generally flexible or strong or, whatever it is, but it's more powerful if you know, like, why your training really matters to you and the type of person that you want to be. Because that's a lot deeper sense of motivation, and it's reinforcing your image of yourself, right?
Is that like purely but that's not purely aesthetic, right?
No, that's just one component, right?
Because you could think that somebody who's going to 24-hour fitness or whatever major gym, which they're great, they're typically inexpensive and they have a lot of options for people. But it's not uncommon to find a lot of people wearing a lot of makeup and a lot of motivation around the superficial. Not always. This is not always a general claim, but it's not uncommon to see a lot of people there on their cell phones and not maybe as motivated around improving something structural versus something superficial.
Right. Yeah. Pursuing, the way I would describe it is kind of you're pursuing the aesthetics at the expense of function.
Because we want the aesthetics. Like it's not, you can't say that anybody who's training for a really maybe high level goal, like I want to get that 1-arm handstand, or I want to get my 60-second handstand, or I want to get those 10 pull-ups. It's still something around the show of what you can do. So there's still that superficial element. Like it's not very black and white.
And we all want to look good naked.
We want to look good naked.
We want to look good
that's a good motivation. That is a good motivation. If you want to look good naked, train on, my friends.
If you stop caring about how you look naked, bad things happen.
Bad things will happen. It's true. It's very true.
You let yourself
It's so
go.
true.
It's like,
it's interesting. But that is like a truism right there that I think is like universal.
Yeah. So like, I'd rather though help someone look good naked by building a body that can do awesome stuff. Because I think you can have both. But I think it's important to be clear on, it doesn't need to be like, this ultimate vision of like, these are the 5, specific things that I want to do, whatever. It doesn't need to be this big existential thing, but I think at least knowing like, I think that parkour is really badass. Or I want to be able to run through the woods without getting tired. Or I want to be the guy that can climb the mountain and then play with his kids and roll around on the floor and, not have aches and pains or whatever that is, right? Or maybe it is the 1-arm handstand. Maybe you're like, I just want to do awesome shit.
Yeah, because you want to maybe know that you can do it. That's something that I've kind of come back to for myself with various goals, that sometimes I just want to know if I can do it because I see somebody else that can do it. And maybe I haven't gotten certain skills, and maybe I never will. But back to what you were talking about earlier, the there's so much to be learned in the process that you can only learn and know about if you go through the process.
Right. Yeah. It teaches you things about yourself that are valuable. Right. And I think ultimately, you know, if your training is doing its job, it should be helping you become a better person, a stronger person, right? Like, I think that there's a lot of opportunity if that's what we want to choose. Of course, you know, you don't have to choose this, but I personally think it's more valuable and more worthwhile because you're already doing it, right? If you're training, you're already doing it. Why not have that be training for the type of person that you want to be?
Yep.
You know, why not be practicing that while you're training? You're already doing it.
Yeah, it's really interesting too to think. It's something that I think social media and all the various means of seeing and interacting with imagery of other people doing things that you're not doing has only exacerbated. And that is that when I have in various times focused too much of my time and energy gleaming and looking at someone else doing something that I'm not doing, it's made me less motivated to do that thing than not looking at that stuff. But there's this really interesting place that I've come to where I can still look to other people, to other role models maybe who are doing remarkable things. But if I am in my own training, if I am in my own pursuit of that same skill or that same element of strength or whatever fitness they have, then I understand more about where I'm at and where I could be, and it takes away a lot of those feelings of regret or maybe anxiety around starting to do something, because I know I'm trying to do something and I'm going for it, you know. I think it's a little bit of a divergent
that's good
talk, but it's interesting because it's so easy to get caught up in what everybody else has, what you don't. But when you're going for it and when you're really, really trying, then you know you're giving it some energy, some effort. Maybe it's not all of your effort, but maybe it's enough to know that you're making steps towards the right direction.
Right.
Yeah. Gold medal bodies. So is this when you were doing, is that when you first got those 5 muscle ups or 10 muscle ups or however many muscle ups you were doing? Because you've got some feats of strength that a lot of people aspire to, the physique, you know?
That took me a while to get the muscle ups. I mean, that was a big goal for me for a while, and it was like failure after failure. And that's what, back to your point about Instagram. That's what people don't show you. It's just all the times they're failing.
Nobody shows all the stuff that they're failing at.
Yeah.
Nobody
In fact,
shows
I want to post more of that stuff. I'm telling you right now, because I think that's
maybe
important.
in Instagram stories, right, where it disappears.
Right. No. In the feed.
In the feed.
In
all
the
right,
feed, bro.
All right, I will match your post for failures, because I've got plenty of those on video. I want to keep moving on with your timeline progression, but actually, now that we just mentioned video, with regards to video, what is your perspective on its utility for someone in training? Is that something that you advocate for your students to record themselves, use that as a tool for research?
Yes, for sure, 100%. Because, your body will lie to you, right? Like, you'll think you're doing something, and it's just not the case. It's not happening. The video is very honest. It's just, there it is.
It is what it is.
It's just, it just tells the truth. And it's not that your body is that sounds dramatic, but it's not that your body is necessarily lying to you. It's when that happens and you think you're doing something that you're not actually doing, it's that you don't have an accurate ability to sense what's going on. you know. And video, I think, helps you close that gap, right, between your ability to sense internally what's happening, and over time, you'll need video less and less if you're using it appropriately, right? Because you'll see something and be like, oh, it felt like this, but that wasn't what was happening. Let me try it like this, and then you'll see it, and then hopefully those things will start to match up more. But yeah, I think it's a great tool. You know, it's something we use with all of the people that we work with, you know, that are online students, send us videos. You know, it's going to help us, but it's also going to help you because your first force, and for some people, it's like the first time they actually saw themselves doing something and they're like, oh, wow, that's what it looks like. It felt like this for so long. They thought they were like, you know, it's funny. One of the movements that we use to diagnose and sort of assess people is just a lunge. You know,
what does your lunge look like?
Simple lunge, and it's amazing how many people struggle with the lunge. You know, lacking stability, lacking balance, lacking, you know, core strength, lower body strength, coordination. It's a simple movement, but it's challenging to do really well. And it's funny how people, when they see that, they're like, that's not what I felt.
Yeah.
You know, they thought they were like, you know,
in that perfect form,
doing it really well.
Yeah, you're about to dash off 100 meters for the Olympics. You know, you're like, yeah, I got that same lunge form,
and you're like,
yeah. It's so interesting. You know, I bring it up because last year I did some online programming, and this was after I did some in-person workshops with the team over at Edo Portal, and the programming they gave me was very good. I learned a lot. I had some good progression, good results from it. I have to say, though, one of the things that really was invaluable was the amount of video that they required from me as a student. And it was a very, yes, you did this correctly. No, you didn't correctly. Do it again. Film it again. Resubmit the video, and then we'll tell you whether or not you can move on to the next element or the next progression. So video was very useful, but it was also one of those processes that, you know, in my work as a commercial filmmaker, I'm always behind the camera, not as much in front of it.
Yeah.
And bringing the camera to the gym, not so much fun.
Yeah.
Not so much fun all the time. Most of the time, I would say, but
From
an incredibly
being
useful.
self-conscious about it.
Yeah,
or?
For me to be a little bit self-conscious because, you know, you're maybe in a setting where there's other people around and maybe they're in
guy.
the video. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe you need to take your shirt off to see something about what is or isn't being recruited in your back and your shoulders, whatever.
Right. And everyone just assumes you're some vain person that's just posting shit on Instagram. Like,
but there's something to that too, you know. But
being able to just get over that.
Yeah.
Being like, hey, I'm that guy, and like, so what? Yeah. You're not comfortable with being that person, but you know what? I am.
Yeah, but it's crazy because now for a lot of last year, I have this big catalog of lots of failures and some successes too, which is actually kind of a nice thing too about using video as a tool for movement research. You should
make a compilation, man.
Yeah, I've got some of those out there, but it would be nice to have. But you see, this is the thing. It's always thinking that there's always going to be a better expression of it. Because whatever the ones that I got, I would think like, oh, okay, those were good, but I know I can do better.
Yeah. But those are the ones that people really want to see, though.
Maybe.
Yeah.
So, Jeet Kune Do in California moved on to gold medal bodies gymnastics training here in Oregon. Where did your training evolve from there? You got your muscle ups. That was a big goal, and hitting multiple reps.
I got obsessed with a couple of things that I got obsessed with for a while were hand balancing, training at first I was just trying to do the do more sort of thing.
I'm kicking up. I just got to kick up more.
Just kick up. I would just kick up so many times and fail constantly. What really changed it for me was training at a local place here in Portland, Night Flight. And shout out to Nicholas, who's the Terminator.
Oh, okay. So
Yeah.
because there's someone I know, Nicolo Carwald.
Nicolo. Yeah.
Nicolo Carwald?
I think so.
No, Nicolo
He was
Carwald went on to do circus with a different school, but if you're thinking of the Terminator, that's somebody else.
Nikita, sorry.
Yeah, because he
Nicholas.
worked with Steve Atlas,
Steve
who I
Atlas,
had done
yeah.
who I did a workshop with now.
Brutal
years
teacher,
ago.
man. Brutal.
From Russia.
Yeah, Russia.
Nikita?
Used to be in Cirque du Soleil.
Very accomplished hand balancer. I've only seen his videos, but
He holds the world record for the most consecutive one arm straddle presses.
Is that right?
Yeah, I think it's like 16 in a row.
Okay, so for anybody who doesn't know what that is, you're holding a handstand on one arm, which compared to two arms is. I wish someone could give a good analogy about this, but
Like 10
imagine,
times harder.
imagine running, running down the street versus running up a mountain. Like running up a mountain is a one-arm handstand, running on the street is a two-arm handstand. But now a straddle planche a straddle press, Stalder press, one-arm handstand is when you're in the one-arm handstand, you lower your legs between your hands, your feet never touch the ground, and then you bring your feet back up over your head, back into the one-arm handstand, and he would do that consecutively.
Yeah, 16 times, I believe.
16 repetitions in a row. That's insane. It's absolutely insane.
He was such a brutal teacher. Like, he told me when I was trying to do the splits, I think I was like, I don't know, I was probably like 12 inches away from it. And he was like, you can get that in a month if you try hard enough.
It's a very Russian work ethic right there. Yeah.
Okay, sure. His favorite number was more. Or no, wait, again. His favorite number was again. That was a joke in class. He would just be like, again.
So it's like you're going to a track workout that never has
It never
an
ends.
end. Yeah.
It's like the Twilight Zone. Yeah.
But it works because your
It
handstand.
worked. It got so much better.
Yeah.
Oh my God. And feedback, back to the whole feedback thing. Like, I was just in my room doing the wrong shit over and over, you know?
But then working with a coach.
Yeah. Working with a coach. He was brutally honest, but it was very valuable. So yeah, got into hand balancing for a while. That was fun. Bouldering.
Awesome.
Bouldering's been fun. Haven't been doing it as much lately. Got into natural parkour, tree climbing stuff. Pretty diverse. Consider
Awesome.
like, yeah, I like doing a lot of different kind of stuff.
Yeah, and those are all activities skills that share. There's elements of the training between those different activities that I imagine carry over to those other practices, like you're dealing with balancing upside down. That's one thing, but when you're now balancing on a rock wall, you still have to have an understanding of your position on the wall, your kinesthetic awareness, right? It has to be at a certain level to excel.
Yeah, it's definitely different, for sure for me. But hand balancing taught me a lot about stacking. Stacking the joints properly. Because before, I just tried to use muscle for everything. Like I would planche my way into handstands, which we talked about a little bit about the planche earlier. It's like, rather than your shoulders are stacked totally over your wrists, your shoulders are far forward and you're more in a more of a push-up kind of position with your shoulders. And you're just using so much more energy. So hand balancing taught me a lot about like stacking, alignment, being more efficient, right? And that has so much carryover into bouldering. For
Absolutely,
sure.
yeah. Knowing where you have an opportunity to use a little bit less energy so you can go further.
Yeah. They call it like you leveraging your skeleton.
Oh,
right.
Totally. Yeah. That's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, because with bouldering, with rock climbing, you're always looking for very small moments where you can hang maybe your skeletal structure versus using muscular force to try to remain closer to the wall,
Which makes the difference between, a really good climber and then like an elite climber.
Of course, yeah.
They know where to rest. They know where they can leverage their skeleton just a little bit better than the other person.
They know how to use all of that crazy strength better too. Yeah,
right.
Because that's the thing. Those two go hand in hand. The stronger you get, the better you're at. Maybe this type of hold, but then if you're also better at your leverage, your understanding of leverage, your understanding of body positioning, skeletal structure, then you can better utilize that strength and keep climbing harder grades, which can take you to different places. It's really interesting to think about that.
Yeah.
With with where you are now, with how you're working with students, what does that look like? You have Uncaged Human, and then there's Embodied Strength. How are those two programs?
So Uncaged Human is kind of my brand that I've had for the last 3 years or so. Embodied Strength is a project that I started with my friend and business partner, Jamie Mock. And I met him at a movement conference or movement camp, I guess, outdoor movement camp last year, 2017. We just, we had similar visions, similar, things that we saw in the movement world where we thought we could collaborate. And so we've launched this project, Embodied Strength, which is a much more intensive sort of online group coaching offering.
Small groups,
Small groups, yeah. We don't work with more than 20
more
people
personalized
at a time.
programming.
Yeah, more personalized. So we do assessment for everyone. We coach you every single week over the course of 3 months. So it's much more for people that want to go deep, like, and what we found, just like you and I have benefited so much from hiring our own coaches and stuff like that.
Really invaluable.
It's,
attending seminars, lots of money has been invested, but it's all been worthwhile. Even the ones that I've come away from maybe not as enthusiastic, I've definitely learned what to look for.
I've had a few of those.
Yeah,
for sure as well. But you every time you learn and you grow, and we're passionate about really helping people at a deep level. And, some people, a book is great, or, a group class is great, or, do it yourself kind of thing. But a lot of people struggle with that.
Yeah.
A lot of people struggle with getting the results that they want. So, for the people that really do want to go deeper and, have that more intensive level of process, like that's who we work with that.
Yeah, because I couldn't agree more that collective knowledge is really what is at, I think, the foundation of anybody who I've learned from, who I've looked up to and respected as a very capable practitioner or teacher. They always, those teachers will always talk about the teachers that they had, about the schools that they invested in, the lessons that they learned from their teachers, the workshops that they attended, the money that they spent to learn. It's not always just about the money, but it is, in a way reflective of where someone values somebody else's advice.
Right.
Like I went to a Ido Portal workshop last spring,
which is not cheap.
Not cheap, yeah, but totally worth it. I think it was an invaluable event to attend. But there was a Q&A, and one of the other attendees asked Ido, I heard this rumor that back in the day you paid Charles Poliquin X amount of dollars for a phone call, a private phone call. And Ido's response was essentially, it's incorrect. I actually paid Charles 2x, twice as much as what you said, for that 1 hour phone conversation with him. And I filled up 5, or 6 manila pages front and back because I couldn't stop writing all this valuable information that
Yeah.
Charles was sharing with me. Rest
Yeah.
in peace, Charles Pollock, one of the greatest like strength and conditioning coaches of all time, who
Yeah,
passed away last September.
Just a giant in the
Yeah.
field.
But it's so easy to look at somebody like Ito or anybody who's, a really high level, mover, fitness personality, and think that they did it on their own, but it's just so far from the truth. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, when you look at someone like Ito and the teachers he's had, it's immense,
Yeah.
Yeah. So many different people.
Notwithstanding that dude works. He's put in a lot of work.
Yeah.
For anybody who doesn't know, Ito
And made a
Portal,
lot of sacrifices.
Yeah. He's a pretty high level teacher, practitioner. He's worked with a lot of the big mixed martial artists, competitors, most notably Conor McGregor, who boxed against Floyd Mayweather, but Ito wasn't coaching him in that one. Well, I think he was involved in his training. But aside from the fact, yes, I couldn't agree with you more that having a capable coach and having personalized programming is really, in my eyes, the most effective way to make progress.
Yeah.
Yeah. You got to do the work, though.
You gotta do the work. I wish I could. No, actually, that's not true. I was gonna say I wish I could do it for people, but I don't, because that would just robs you of all the benefits and the learning process.
And what does the training look like with Embodied Strength when a student signs up with learning from you and Jamie? How long is the programming?
Yeah, so it's 3 months. 3 months. An hour a day, 6 days a week.
And that starts with an initial assessment, and then
initial assessment. So even before the assessment, we do an hour conversation, at least an hour. Sometimes they go longer, but just to see, like, are you a good fit? We also just want to, we like giving back and helping people too. So whether we work with, those people or not, our goal is in those conversations is just give a lot of value and help them get clear on, what's been holding them back, where it is that they want to go with their training and their lifestyle. And then based on that, like, if we are a good fit, we'll, start the process, do an assessment, and then, start them on the program.
And for anybody who's interested, students can be located anywhere there's an internet access, or how does that work?
Yeah. Basically, all you need is internet access, smartphone. Our equipment is pretty minimal, yoga blocks and gymnastic rings or TRX. But yeah, we have clients all over the place. I was telling you about our client Ulia before.
Yeah, in Germany, right?
In Germany, who's a mom, just super badass woman. I can't wait to share her case study and stuff like that. Hopefully we'll do that soon. But she's a mom of a 2-year-old girl. She's a yoga teacher. Funnily enough, we get a lot of yoga teachers. She is a comedian as well, and a wife. And so she's got a lot of stuff going on.
Eclectic human being.
Yeah. She's got a lot of stuff going on. Super funny, really cool person. Never missed a single day of training. Just like,
that's really impressive.
No excuses, no bullshit, and no judgment. Like, if you get sick or whatever, miss a day, it's all good. Like, don't try to be perfect. That's where people really fuck up, is they try to be perfect, and then they, then they're like, oh my God, I didn't do it, so I might as well not do it anymore. But point being, like, yeah, she just kicks so much ass. And I think the cool thing that I really like about her is just, she's a good example of what's possible when you really focus on why it matters to you, back to that point, and integrating it into your lifestyle in a way that works for you. Like, she works out with her daughter and integrates that into her practice. And it's cool because she's getting stronger to pick her up and more mobile on the ground and better able to play with her. And, I'm sure hopefully it's going to continue to set an example for her of the kind of person that she wants her to become. So, yeah, that I love that. Of course I love the bros. We get those, the super strong bros that just want to get more mobile and strong too. And they have all the time in the world, to dedicate to their training. Those are cool people to work with too. But it's really cool when you get people like that,
Yeah.
are dedicated to making it work, even with all the other stuff they have going on.
And then Uncaged Human, how is that different?
So
Fitness program.
yeah, Uncaged Human, I still do some one-on-one stuff there. I do writing there, do a little bit of speaking, and events and stuff like that, workshops and things like that. So that's just kind of my playground, place to put out my ideas and throw stuff out there and see
your
what
digital
resonates with
research
people.
laboratory, right?
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's a process of just like we're started this conversation, figuring things out, and then realizing like, oh God, every week it seems like I find a new teacher or new idea.
Yeah, who are you listening to now? Who are you learning the most from now? I mean, maybe even outside of movement, because that's the other thing too. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the training world, right?
Yeah. Funnily enough, I got down this, Jamie and I went down this path.
You were doing some work with John Yuan too, right?
John Yuan. Yeah. I haven't got a chance to work with him directly yet. I would love to. But his program on spinal waves has been really good. Definitely recommend people check that out. So yeah, John has been a huge influence for me for sure. Katie Bowman has been a huge influence. Frank Francich, which we mentioned earlier. But the one field that has been really interesting for me lately has been, God, I wish I could remember the name. We'll have to figure it out later. But there's this book that I've been reading about kind of like deciphering nature's hidden clues and signs. So learning like how to navigate based on natural signals, like the patterns of how moss grows on trees, and like, learning how to tell direction based on the arc of the sun and where the moon is rising and different things like that. Like I'll go through processes where I'll really geek out on really specifically movement stuff, and then I'll just be like, I can't anymore. It's just like too much. And then I like kind of changing it up and focusing on something that's totally different.
But I can't imagine that you don't find
brain.
threads.
Yeah, it's interesting. It feeds my brain where I'm just like, oh yeah, like everything is so connected, often in unexpected ways.
Yeah, because I can't think about people who, if they were to think about how a handstand is supposed to look in a most ideal form, it's perfectly straight up and down and totally still, where the reality of that is actually like totally opposite of that. There's all these micro movements happening. There is no perfect straight up and down. It's slight arc here in the lower spine, maybe a slight pike in the toe, and constant movements in the hands, the fingers, the wrist, readjusting the balance. Yeah, micro balancing the belly, trying to find that stillness that's not too rigid but yet not too soft. The breath, all these movements that until you practice it just doesn't make sense. And when you think about how the strongest trees are, it's like, oh yeah, they're just like totally straight up and down. But no, it's actually like slightly arced and probably moving a little bit in the wind to have that flexibility.
Right. Yeah.
So I love that connection to nature.
Yeah, the wind is constantly shaping the trees. The light is shaping the trees, the soil, all these different influences that are basically determining how is the tree growing. It's it's super fascinating. Yeah.
I love it. And not to go into it, because this could be an entire conversation on its own, but when students come to you, they're coming to you for movement training, for fitness, for wellness, for understanding how to move better, how to become more functional, and various physical goals that they have, or aesthetic goals around their physicality. Diet, nutrition. Do you teach your students about that, or is there general guidelines that you advocate, or maybe resources that you point students towards?
Yeah, we will support people with diet if they elect for that. You know, some people they want support with that, and some people it's not that much of a focus for them. But generally, yeah, we do have some, you know, some basic principles. Like, I eat kind of a paleo diet, flexible, you know, try to eat mostly just whole foods, unprocessed foods. I do intermittent fasting. So like 16 hours a day, not eating, 8 hours a day eating. I try to keep it pretty simple, you know, like there's a lot of complexity that you can get into with dieting and stuff like that. And that's cool if you want to go down that rabbit hole. I'm not an expert in nutrition. I'm happy to tell people like some basic principles that have worked, you know, for me. But I'm not qualified to really, you know, there's people that spend their whole lives on like how to like weight loss or, you know, nutrition optimization and
how to count your macros and
sure. Yeah.
It's a complex puzzle. I don't know anybody who has it totally figured out. And I couldn't agree.
And we're just learning all the time about nutrition. Like we thought that like something I just learned, you know, like I've been taking vitamin D supplements for so long, right? Because we live in the Pacific Northwest and
not getting enough sunlight, so you got to supplement with the D.
But apparently you're supposed to take vitamin K3 with vitamin D, which I didn't know for a long time. And I don't know if how long that's been, you know, known, but it's like we're always learning different things.
Yeah.
And it's just like a continual process of
I've heard about that, like where certain vitamins are more activated or more
cofactors, right?
They're acting as cofactors, like copper and boron. Those were like two supplements I was like taking together for a little bit of time. I don't know why, but I think that it was like copper and boron, and then maybe zinc as well, like all kind of like mixed in. Maybe magnesium. We are not experts in nutrition.
No, totally. I'll just get really excited, listen to people's podcasts and be like, I'm taking those supplements.
Yeah.
And then like, I'll take them for a little while and then not. And it's not the most strategic.
But constantly wanting to learn more. And that's something that I really admire about you. You know, you're always wanting to learn more. You understand that it's not a place that you get to. It's about the process of continuing to expand how much you don't know, right?
Right.
Your knowledge about how much there is more to know.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a process of continually owning more, like how clueless you actually are.
Yeah. But it's interesting, and I think it's something that keeps, I don't know, keeps us moving along in this like journey, whatever this is of life, you know, of understanding how much there is more to understand. Dude, I could keep chatting with you for hours, and I'd love to do it actually in a different setting where we're actually moving around more.
Yeah, we should do a part two.
A part two outdoors, in a gym, anywhere and everywhere where there's more movement beyond just this pivoting of the chair.
Yeah.
But before I let you go, I want people to know where they can find you, how they can connect with you, and where is that and how is that?
Yeah. So Instagram.
How do you spell your name?
Jonathan Mead, JONATHAN MEAD, like the drink. That's where I'm most active on social media. So you can reach out to me. Feel free to send me a message or whatever. uncagedhuman.com. Continually writing stuff, putting stuff out there. And then, Embodied Strength manliness.co.
Mm-hmm.
If you're interested in that whole, that whole thing, that whole process, you can find us there as well. Yeah, it's been a pleasure, man.
Awesome.
Appreciate it.
Likewise. Thank you so much. And you know what? I didn't want you to leave before I asked the one question that I've asked every guest so far, but fear. What is your relationship like with fear in your life?
Fear. My relationship with fear is that it's usually a kind of like a barometer, I guess, of like, is this the right direction, for me? If I'm not at least a little bit afraid
Mm-hmm.
of what I'm doing, I'm not like feel a little bit naked, then I feel like I'm probably playing it a little safe. Yeah, I'm interested in growth. And if I'm just being safe all the time, doing the things, like that I'm most comfortable with, like, I'm not really growing. I'm not really pushing myself. So yeah, I won't lie and say that it's not uncomfortable and that I wouldn't rather, be in my cozy little blanket and wrap fear around me and just be like, just safe here. But yeah, I think I've grown to like it more.
I like that barometer. I think that's a great way to think about it.
Yeah.
Excellent. My man, I appreciate you greatly. And thank you so much for taking the time to be here today.
Yeah.